Okay, good morning. Welcome to our discussion today, or our chat about Baptisias. Baptisias are a plant that we've long been interested in. It's a North American native that goes from the Canadian border all the way down to the Mexican border. It's an incredible plant, spring flowering, member of the legume family, which would include things like better known lupins, which many people up north grow, or peanuts, which many people down in the south grow. Very great plants for a number of reasons. Primarily, they're very drought tolerant. You can grow them with cactus. They're really quite amazing. And they'll also grow as marginal aquatics in standing water. So the diversity of where they grow, as long as it's full sun, is pretty incredible. So back in 1996, we decided we wanted to start a breeding program. So the first thing we did is traveled around the country with the monograph in hand. And a monograph is basically everything that's known about Baptisias. And in that case, it was written in 1939. So we're going all across the country looking for genetics. So we go out, we take cuttings, gather seed off different plants, and then bring them back in and try to see what we can create. Baptisias are known to interbreed in the wild, so it's not a very unusual thing, but there'd never been any selections made in the wild. And at the time we started, there were only two Baptisia cultivars in existence, Purple Smoke and Carolina Moonlight, both releases from the North Carolina Botanic Garden. So we wanted to see what the possibilities were. So we've been doing that since 1996, and we'll take you through our trials today, which you can see behind me, and we'll show you the thought processes and how new Baptisias are developed. So for us, the thing that we look for in a Baptisia are fairly tall bloom spikes, because we like the separation of the spike from the foliage. That's what really makes it showy. I've seen so many plants that were introduced that the flowers are down in the foliage, and to me, I just don't see the value in that. Now, sometimes when you have a really hot spring, all Baptisias are going to try to do a little of that, but we really select based on good height. And then we also obviously look for colors. We look for forms. We want a good plant in the garden that's not going to be real blousy. If you grow species and you grow them from seed, things like Australis, they're just going to get really big, and they might be showy for a couple of days, but they're not going to have good structure in the garden. So as we go through now, this is a seedling bed, so there's seedlings in here all the way back from the 90s, a few. And we go through with several colors of flags. So we'll go through anything that we decide is not going to be acceptable, that immediately gets a red flag. That's a discard. And then other flags, you'll see a lot of pink flags as we go through. Pink flags means we're probably going to discard it, but we're not quite ready. We want to watch it through a period of time. So Baptisias can last, some of them can last almost a month in flower, depending on your weather, where you're located. Obviously, you get a couple days in the 90s, they're going to go really fast. So let's sort of walk through. So we're starting out here. These are 2020 seedlings, so we're getting a little bit of flower. We don't do a lot of discarding in 2020 unless they're just really ugly, because we really don't know the capabilities yet. So back here you'll see a 2009 seedling, which is really nice. We got really nice white spikes, really nice dark gray foliage. But the question then is it better than something we already have? We've introduced one real tall white, we've got another one going, so most likely that's going to get discarded, even though it is an exceptional garden plant, because it's too close to other things. Right beside that is one of our gold leaf. We've been breeding gold leaves for probably 15 years now, and this has probably some of the most stunning gold foliage. The spikes are blue flowers, which are great, but the spikes aren't tall enough for us. So we'll hold on to this and use this for breeding with others, but we're not going to ever introduce that. I just don't see the spikes being tall enough. I think we can do better. So again, 2009's been here for 12 years. So here's a 2018, again, really nice spikes. Our gold standard for tall yellows is one we introduced a few years ago, Yellow Tower. So we have that planted nearby. This is a little lighter. I just don't think it'll ever make anything, but we may use that in our breeding program. So we look, as a plant breeder, you look at not only is it an end product, but what characteristics does it have that we can put into other plants down the road. Breeders are always thinking of what's the next step, what's the next generation, okay? We're also looking at different flowering times. So for example, you see in this 19033, this is still not even showing any color yet, where many Baptisias have completely started. So you have a long season. So we can have Baptisias that start blooming, we're doing this today, the first week of May. We have some that start blooming first to the second week of March. So that's 2 months ago. So by selecting Baptisias that have different bloom seasons, you can have a continual show. So this is going to be part of our late series that we're working on. And you see more that are just popping out of the ground. So to do that, we had to get genetics from up in the Minnesota populations that don't come up to much later, because the southern genetics are all up really early. So we really do have to bring genetics in from many different areas to get the traits that we want. You'll see back here we have a beautiful variegated leaf. This is a breeding line we've been working on to get nice variegation in the plant, but we still haven't been able to get the flower spike. We found that when we add variegation, the flower spike size gets greatly reduced. So that's going to take several generations to have that nice variegated foliage and good tall flower spikes. So here's an example of one we've red flagged. So this will be a discard. This is a 2019 seedling. And for a 2019 seedling, it's only showing 2 main flower spikes. We got some side flower spikes, which are nice. The color's nothing exceptional. It just doesn't have anything. We've got so much better. Whereas beside it here, we have a 2020. And see, it's already got 4 main spikes and about 8 to 10 other spikes. So that just shows you what possibilities. So we have so many things to compare them to. The color is nothing to write home about, but that will go into our dwarf isolation block. So we're working now on dwarf plants. So anything that's going to stay miniature, under 3 feet, goes in a dwarf block where they can only, the bees are only going to pollinate each other. And that's where we, again, work to get a dwarf strain coming out. All right, so here's another 2020. Probably going to get discarded. You see, I mentioned we put the pink flag on. That means going to watch it for a few more days. Doesn't have great color. It's got really interesting. New growth is black, and we love that trait, but we've got that in some other things. So I'm just not seeing where that's going to be anything. Matter of fact, we'll go ahead and swap that out from a pink flag to a red flag. So that's gone. All right, here's another. Here's a 2018. Most likely that's going to get gone. For an 18, it's only got 6, 7 spikes. So it really doesn't give us much. The height of the spikes are not very good. We're looking also at how tight those flowers are clustered together, and those are pretty open. We try not to make these decisions early on because you could have a late frost, which could affect that. You may have wind, which a lot of ours got wind blown a couple days ago in a 35-mile-an-hour wind. That's just not showing us anything. Matter of fact, we'll go ahead and change that one out. That can go. That's not going to give us anything. All right, here's a 2019. Now, we looked earlier at 19. See how many spikes are on there? That's got a lot of spikes. Now, it just so happens we've got a couple that are very similar to this. So we've got a pink flag on it. We'll pick between 2 or 3 we have that are similar to that. We'll keep one. The rest of them will go. Okay, here's a 2019. So to give you an idea of the difference, that's a 2019, this is a 2019. Look at the incredible density of flowers. It's a very much of a light pink, which is an interesting color. It's not a bright, vivid color, so don't know if the market would be interested. But this is a density of spikes that we like. So there's probably 150 to 180 spikes on that plant compared to that 2019 where there's maybe a couple dozen. So this is the type form we like in the garden. We think that's going to be a great garden plant. So that's what we're looking for. So we put a white flag on that, and that means that's of really high interest that we're going to continue to watch that. And you can see where, as we mix colors, we're starting to get some really interesting, really like in the pinks and the oranges, heading toward the reds. There's never been a true red, but we're working on that. And so what we do, we'll take the colors that we have from our selected forms. Once we get the form right, once we get the density right, and then we'll sit down with the color wheels and we'll look at what colors do we have to put together to get the colors we want. Say we want red. So we would pick out of those, we might need a green and a brown and a orange, and you plant those together in an isolation block, which means far enough away where the bees are probably not going to go to anything else. And that's how we get the color forms that we're looking for. Once we have the forms, once we have the density of flowers there. So it's a multi-step process over a period of years. So here's a 2020, that's already got a decent amount of flowers. So this will go in our dwarf block because we know that one's going to stay small, and then we'll see what comes out of the dwarf block. Now here's a 2019. Most likely this is going to go, we'll give that a pink flag, which means we'll watch it, but we don't have high hopes for it. It's got very tall spikes. It's got very coarse foliage, where we really like to get more of the fine foliage. It's just a much better appearance in the garden. The wind knocked one spike, but we're not going to knock it down in points for that. But got a decent spike. We'll watch it a few more days and see how it opens up and if it's something worth preserving. Okay, this is sort of where we would want in a taller Baptisia. This is 2013 seedlings, been here for 8 years. Beautiful spikes, great density, great color. So then we have to compare it to, we happen to have about 4 others that are very similar to that, and only one gets kept. So most likely this probably will not make the cut, even though pretty much anyone would consider that's a pretty exceptional Baptisia. So as a breeder, you have to be incredibly ruthless, so that really the absolute finest of what you've got. And every year we do this, the bar continues to rise, because the more exceptional clones that we have, and we also have to grow everything that every other breeder does, so that we know, so we're not duplicating somebody else's efforts as well. But there really has not been anybody else breeding for the spike height and density that we have. So it's a little different model. Each breeder is a little different in what they breed for. Okay, so you see this one has got a red flag, and interesting, these are sister seedlings. So this one, these are both 2018 seedlings. It's got plenty of spikes, but they're down in the foliage. The foliage is already risen up, so that's an absolute no-no for us. So despite most people would think, well, that's pretty exceptional in my garden, that doesn't even come close to our standards. And its sister, we have a pink flag on, we're watching. It's got, the color's nice, got a little better separation, just doesn't have the number of spikes we would expect. So more than likely we'll watch that a couple more days, see if that has any genetics that we would like in a future generation, and if not, it'll go. So here's a dwarf 2019. Now that's pretty much gone. That was an early one, but we have a silver flag, and silver flags for us means that goes into our dwarf isolation block. We did think that had enough good genetics to further look at it for breeding for something miniature. But again, it's why we have to evaluate pretty much every 1 to 2 days through the blooming season, because they change so much. They'll look great one day, and then the next day a heat wave has come in and they've already dropped their flowers. So you have to consistently look at these. This 2015 is very interesting. We're starting to get where we want to get in terms of red flowers. This certainly is not red, but it's a really neat, almost a cinnamon color, a color we really haven't got in Baptisias before. This is 2015, so that's 6 years old. So that's not a finished product. So we will actually come in and designate this one. And in our case, we use yellow flags for things we want to gather seed from. So, and this will be propagated, and this will go in an isolation block to try to get closer to red. So we really like the color, but the spike height is not there. Just the appearance of the plant is not there. So that will not be introduced, but that will hopefully lead to something that can be. 2012, again, it's nice spikes, but I doubt this will go anywhere, so we're going to give this a pink flag. That means it's got about another week of trying to really show us something special, or that's going to have to go, because that's been taking up room for 9 years now, and that's a long time. So some of the genetics we will use several times in developing another line, and then that original plant goes. All right, so here's a 2019. We looked at some 19s earlier. That's got good density. A fairly decent color, so that will go in our dwarf isolation block to produce something dwarf. So here's another that will go into the dwarf block. This is a 2018 seedling. So I like the form of that. That's really nice. The color's not a finished product yet, but it does have that new growth. It's sort of a blackish brown, and we like that character. So that'll go in there and see what we can produce once we put that in the dwarfs. So here's another 2015. If you just looked at that without looking at anything else, that is exceptional. And I mean, truly, I'd put that on an 8 of a scale of 1 to 10. But we have other things that are close enough to that, so I don't see that going forwards even. And it's hard. It's really hard as a breeder to discard something that's really that nice. We got good color, good spike size, the plant's a good size, but again, when you start doing that final comparison to everything else, we've got things that are just a hair better than that, but it's been an exceptional one. One of the interesting forms that the genetics originally came out of a Chicago Botanic Gardens introduction, some of Jim Alt's wonderful work, where the flowers actually change colors. So we use one of his lunar series, where the colors actually morph. They come out white and they age to purple, which we think is exceptional. Now, his original one is a much taller plant, so we've been able to shrink that down, make the foliage much smaller using Baptisia albescens, a southern species. So we've got this 2019, so that's 2 years old in the ground. We think this actually could be really nice as a dwarf series. So we'll take now, move that out of our main block into our dwarf block this fall, and then see where we can go from there. So this is one of our earlier introductions, Baptisia Yellow Towers out of our Tower series, and these were really one of our earlier introductions. Still hold up really exceptional. This is a fairly early one. It's the first of the yellows to bloom for us. So this has been in bloom now for almost 3 weeks. So it's really starting to go over, but still a great plant. And it's always good when you have an introduction that's 5-10 years old that still measures at the very top. Then you know you've done a good job, and that's sort of our goal. Is we don't want these to be in the market just 1 or 2 years. We want them to be in the market 50 or 100 years, because we want the standard to be that high when we introduce it. This is one of our introductions that's already out there. This is Baptisia Blue Bunchkin. Again, I showed you one earlier that didn't quite measure up to this. That's sort of the perfect plant. The size is great, the spikes are great, the color's great, the density of the flowers. That's really sort of that point. That would be as close to a 10 as we'll ever give a plant that just has all those characteristics. So that's what we're looking for. Whereas we go here, here's a 2015. It's again a beautiful plant in the garden, but it just does not have the density of spikes, the height of spikes when you compare it to something like Blue Bunchkin. So that's already got a red flag, and that'll get discarded this year. We have some very interesting characteristics, like on this 2018, where the foliage is yellow, the new growth is sort of a cinnamon bronze. The flowers aren't much to write home about. They're a little more interesting. They've been blooming for a couple weeks, but that will definitely go in the isolation block, because if we can get that same foliage, that wonderful habit, that wonderful dwarf size, and get the spikes a little taller, that will be something absolutely exceptional. So here's another of our recent introductions, Baptisia aspiring. You see again, look how tall the spikes are, good separation from the foliage, good density, good color, and good form. So that really, that's what our standards are for something to make it to market. This is one we'll probably introduce in a couple years. It doesn't have the most fabulous density, but what we like about it is the tallest Baptisia we grow. It'll approach 6 foot tall, which gives you something for the back of the border that you can use, but it does have good spikes. This came out of our Ivory Towers breeding line that we introduced many years ago, and definitely taller. So that would be one we'd introduce really as a specialty plant for designers, because designers tend to look at things very different. You have a need that you need to fill, and we really don't have a 6 foot tall Baptisia for the back of the border, and that'll give us that. But not every homeowner wants something that tall. So here's another one that's not quite as tall. We can't quite decide what to do with this because we got another one that's fairly similar, but great form, great structure. We like Baptisias with what we call naked legs. We like it where there's no foliage at the bottom, because then you can plant other things underneath them. I don't want a Baptisia that makes a big blob and goes all the way down to the ground. That's just, as a designer, I really like that opportunity to underplant with different textures. But that's a 2014, so it's been here for 7 years. That's just hard to get rid of that, because that really is an exceptional plant. One of the characteristics we're really excited about are the dark stems, where they're almost black. This is 2017, so that's now 4 years old. This does have good spikes. It did not fare well in the 35-mile-an-hour winds the other day. Now, that's not always a representative of the plant. That's a representative of where the spikes were when the winds came, because all the spikes are fine once they get emerged, but when they're right in the process of coming out, they're very soft, and all-day wind can really make them malleable. So we're not going to do anything with that this year. We'll wait till next year and reevaluate it, but we do like the color. And then the other one right here, a sister seedling to that, came out of the same seed pod, is this. This has just the blackest stems of any Baptisia we have ever grown. Extraordinary white flowers, good density. This will almost assuredly get a name. So that's get a white flag. That means it's right on the top of our list. So that's really, that would be our holy goal. It's holy grail. It's really hard to get much better than that. Now, the other interesting thing we're working on, years ago we found some Baptisias in the wild down in Georgia where the foliage did not come out until the flowers came out. And so we introduced one called Darknet. This is out of that Darknet. Darknet had white flowers, and so we're looking to see what other colors we can get. So this one has the really nice charcoal stems, and they really stay that way, and the foliage really does not emerge until the flower. So this is a yellow flowered one, so we'll really be looking at this year, and still trying to, and sometimes you will have to get the flower color, you'll have to then self that and then go back another generation to get the characteristics to sort out, because in the F1 generation, that's the first time the cross has been made, you will get a mixture of characteristics, but by that next generation you can sort of sort those out, so we'll get back to having less foliage and maybe better flowers. So it's a multi-year to get to the traits you actually want. Okay, so this is the 2020, so look how big that is. So that's got really good vigor, and it's starting to get some interesting traits. We're trying to do a lot with the bicolor flowers. You can see at the base, these are actually coming out light yellow and aging to pink. It's not as dramatic as some of our others, but really good form, so we'll use that to get to future generations. Now here you see one with similar traits. It's a much more defined coloration change from the yellows to the pinks, but the habit's not nearly as nice. So maybe we'll plant those two together and isolate those and let them get it on and see what they produce. Now, I mentioned Darknet earlier is our parent. This is actually Darknet. So you can see you got these wonderful charcoal stems, you got the flowers open, and you have absolutely no leaves. So again, as a designer, I find that absolutely attractive. Now, coming out of that, this is another seedling from Darknet. So we've taken that, we've made the flowers bigger, because the parent is one called Baptisia alba from Georgia. So we've got some yellow in that. We've still got really good dark stems. The foliage is coming out a little bit earlier, but this could be something very interesting, because that's the 2017. So we'll do a good evaluation of that this year and decide if that goes forwards or becomes a parent. So this is one of our upcoming introductions, and you can see that's tall, because I'm 6 foot and it's 6 foot. This is one we're calling lightning rods. Really, it's a pretty incredible plant. The density of the spikes, the sheer number of spikes is absolutely amazing. So we really like everything about that. It's not for a small garden, so it's not something you're going to fit in, because that's a good almost 6 foot across and 6 foot tall. So that's one that's going to take the right space, maybe a large border or a large garden. So I mentioned how early many bloom. This is one of our former introductions, Cloud 9. Absolutely incredible plant early. That's already almost finished. So that would have been blooming back a month ago, and really quite good spikes. But if you looked at it today, you'd say, well, okay, that's a big green blob. But again, it's that getting different seasons of bloom, so you can plant several, and then you've always got Baptisias in bloom for a 3-month period. So you can see some color forms where we're working on getting a beautiful amethyst color here. Again, that one got hit by the wind, so we can't do a good evaluation on that for this year. That'll wait till next year. And here we're going more towards an icy blue with the idea I think we can get even a little more towards a true blue as opposed to a blue lavender with another generation or two. And this is very interesting. This actually has sort of a bicolor flower. This has a purple back, a lavender back, and more of a pink front. So this one I think could have some potential. It's not a finished product. We've already put our yellow flag, which means we're going to be saving seed out of this. Anytime something gets red flagged, it's dug out almost immediately, because we don't want those genetics. We've decided those are inferior genetics. We want those to disappear, and that way we only have the best genetics in. Whereas if we left those red flags in here, they would be crossing and giving us bad traits. We'd be going in the wrong direction instead of going forwards. This is a really interesting color, and this is again trying to get those color breaks through our isolation blocks. This is I'm not sure what color that is. It's sort of a mauvey pink, but really neat. And again, before the wind hit that was a really exceptional plant. So this is a 2017, so that's 4 years old. We got great spikes, great density, great color, and we'll make sure next year that the spikes do stand up in the case of wind, but that's most likely something that's going to wind up getting a name as we go forwards. And so here you see more of that wonderful, that sort of mauve lavender color. We got really good spikes here. I wish that had a few more spikes, but genetically wise, that will give us some really good opportunities here. So one of our earlier introductions, this is Blonde Bombshell. I think is a compact yellow. That's still the head of the class. The density of the flowers is something we've never seen on any other Baptisia. So that really for us was a pretty amazing breakthrough. So this is our Director of Research, Jeremy Schmidt. Jeremy's been out here digging. Anything that had a red flag, as we mentioned, gets taken out. So all of these, yes, it's hard because you're killing some of your children, but that's what we have to do as a good breeder. So this whole front is littered with things that got red flagged because they just didn't measure up to our standards. So it's emotionally, yes, it's very hard being a breeder. It's very hard to discard things, but once you get past a critical mass of numbers, they got to go to make room for newer and better. I hope that gives you a little bit of idea of what goes on behind the scenes and a little insight into the mind of how we develop these plants. It's not something you just come out and a seedling comes up. There's really a lot of thought process and a lot of time into these. So generally by the time something goes from a seedling to introduction, you're looking at 7 to 10 years really, and then you've got to figure out how to propagate it. Baptisias are not the easiest things from cutting, so that also presents a challenge, but we think these great North American natives should be in any garden that has full sun, pretty much anywhere in the US. Thank you for joining us.